everybody, I am Liz and I am here today to do a book review of Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is book 1 of the Aurora cycle and I got some thoughts. As always, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, so you do not have to have read the book to hear my thoughts and feelings. I always welcome your spoilery comments and thoughts down below so we can talk about those bits for those particular people who have read this book and either share my thoughts and feelings or want to dive in deeper. Now, I like to start my reviews off by pointing out potential triggers of each story. This one, I don't really think there's anything big that comes to mind. It's a lot of really typical sci-fi triggers like violence and death. The synopsis for Aurora Rising takes place where Aurora has been frozen and drifting off in deep space for 200 years after her space mission failed to get her to their destination. Now, Tyler Jones discovers her spaceship being torn apart by the treachery of space and decides to save her. While going through her spaceship, he sees everyone else has been dead or deceased for some time, and she is the only surviving member of the spaceship. And so he saves her, whisks her off to his space station, and then resumes his duties to try to find his own space crew to do his own missions, as he has just graduated from his school. And the recruits he's given to form his crew are all the misfits and the leftovers, the people that don't really fit in with the crew for their own reasons, and he gets stuck with them as obviously he was saving Aurora during the choosing ceremony. However, the truth behind Aurora's survival in deep space launches this catalyst of a war, and Tyler and his group are potentially the only people who can stop this war from even starting. Now, I always separate my reviews in 3 parts, with the plot, the setting, and the characters. The plot was probably the weakest point of this whole story because it felt like a setup for the sequel. I felt like everything could be wrapped up in literally 100 pages. The rescue of Aurora, Aurora joining their crew, and then the final destination at the end of this book. That was really the only things that really needed to happen in the story. The whole chase and the missions and everything that really dives you into learning more about the characters and learning more about Aurora's past was interesting, but very, very unnecessary. It mostly just made me irritated because I wanted them to just get to this final destination because I knew that's where things were actually going to happen. As for the setting, I felt like the setting was probably the strongest point in the story because each spaceship ride, each space station, each location that they travel to on their journeys throughout the story are very well described. They're very big in their own culture, their own sets and rules and principles. I thought that those were very well thought out, very well created, and very interesting. Now, the characters, though not necessarily the weakest point, it took me a very, very long time to actually connect with the characters. I really didn't feel for the characters until potentially the last 100 pages of the story. And that, I'll think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there is so many points of view. There's 7 points of view in this story, and what really crushed me is Zila's point of view. She is the brain and the scientist of the crew. She doesn't get a lot of screen time, but not only that, her points of view don't give anything extra to the story. I feel like it's just them giving her screen time because the others get so much more screen time, and it felt very unnecessary, and we didn't really learn anything about her kooky, crazy, psychopathic character and her mindset, and so I felt like it was just really pointless. As for the others, they definitely had their own mindset, their own thought processes. They were very true to their character profiles. However, I felt like they were almost too true to their character profiles to where it became cliche in some moments, or it brought them to be off topic during either a battle or a battle simulation or a stressful situation. They just said things that were a little weird in the moment, and I felt like these characters were almost trying too hard to be sex obsessed, which was interesting because it's not always done that way in YA, but I felt like it was also a little bit too much for me. But as I've said, as the book goes on and I really dive into these characters' minds and their interactions more often, as this is very much a character-based storyline, I definitely started to enjoy them, and so obviously by the end of the book I did start connecting with them. It just took me a little while. Now, as I wrap up my review, I like to talk about my favorite quote and compare this to other stories. Now, my favorite quotes happen to be spoilers, so I will do my least spoilery quote of the 4, and here it is. So to give this some context, this is Aurora talking to a love interest. So it says, "Would you consider letting me make up my own mind about you? I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but did it ever occur to you that if you let me get to know you, I might like you back?" And this was on page 419 to 420. I just really liked it because it kind of puts that decision making that a lot of guys, especially YA love interests, try to force upon their love interest into bringing it back into her own decisions and her own opinions, and so I really appreciated it. As to compare this book to many other stories, I struggle a little bit with finding a perfect match. There's the obvious stories that have space travel and squad goals and multiple points of view, which happens to be Zenith by Lindsay Cumming and Sasha Ellsberg, and also obviously Illuminate, also by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. You have Nixia by Scott Rankin. This also has a space traveling space squad. However, in a majority of the book they're pit up against each other to make the final destination of the mining town, so it's a little different. And then also obviously there's Cinder, which also has a space crew, but mostly just a crew that's trying to stop more bad things from happening. And the last comparable I have for you is Stronger, Faster, and More Beautiful by Arwen Ellis Dayton. This book really just encapsulates the journey of beauty and also the journey of science and genetic modification, genetic engineering. So it has that scientific feel and that sci-fi feel for a lot of stories, but as this book specifically has 6 different storylines that kind of meet this end destination, this end goal, one of the storyline actually fits a lot with Aurora's journey, where he's a character that is out of his own time. He was frozen in time until a treatment option to prevent his cancer from killing him became available, and then he was thawed and things were so drastically different, and it just kind of takes off, and it's so very interesting, his storyline out of those 6. So there you have it. There you have my thoughts and feelings of the book Aurora Rising. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I appreciate your love and support. Please let me know in the comments down below how you felt about Aurora Rising if you've read it. And if you haven't read it yet, I hope my review really put things into perspective on whether or not you're going to read the story or not. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I really appreciate you. I love you guys. Thank you again. And until next time, bye!